Mass Murder by Radioactive Salt. By Charles Nicholas.
Hello, Eli?
Inquired reporter Charlie Storm excitedly of the York City Sun editor.
The Blue Beetle has struck again. Wait, no, I don't know who the Blue Beetle is yet. I only tell you he's in extreme danger. Well, remember how the children of the state orphanage became mysteriously ill? The doctors diagnosed it as radium poisoning, but how it happened is a first-class mystery to them. There's no radium factory within miles of the orphanage. Professor Eduardo Schiaparelli, he's a famous physiologist or something who's been responsible for the children's foods serving without pay, claimed that radium watches were the cause. It seemed that some welfare lads gave the kids watches with radium dials. Professor Schiaparelli says they licked the watches. The funny thing was that the watches showed no such traces, but the doctors thought it the right idea and banned them. The children got better, but temporarily. They became dangerously ill again. Remember that news story, how 10 died last week? Yes, that's it. You're asking what the Blue Beetle has to do with it? Wait, give me a chance. One night, as Professor Schiaparelli was working in his laboratory, a little blue beetle fell on the table. The professor was scared. Guilty conscience? I don't know, but listen to the rest of the story. The Blue Beetle. He yelled. Yes, the Blue Beetle in person, a voice from the professor's back drawled. The professor whirled around. Standing in the door, entirely at ease, was the Blue Beetle. What do you want? The professor asked. The Blue Beetle said nothing. He walked straight ahead and pushed the professor aside. He picked up a jar of common salt and held it close to the professor's face. Taste that, will you? The Blue Beetle said. The professor shirked away from the bottle, scared. No, don't force that stuff into my body. Why didn't you think of it when you fed the kids this radioactive salt? The Blue Beetle said, you know that radioactive salt looks and tastes like ordinary salt, but it is as dangerous as radium. Of course it doesn't last long, but why did you give it to the kids all the time? The professor stared at the Blue Beetle like one struck with a guilty conscience, but he didn't have any. He was afraid of the consequences of the discovery of his crime. He was sort of a maniac. I know why you did it, Professor, the Blue Beetle said coldly. You took this job on purpose. You needed human guinea pigs to find out how radioactive salt works in the human body. You sacrificed the lives of children to back your international reputation as a scientist. The professor glared at him with a wild expression. He rushed the Blue Beetle and pushed him into a storeroom whose door was open. Before closing it, the professor threw a bottle into the room and locked the door. The Blue Beetle had struck his head against a shelf and fell on the floor. He shook his head. Something assailed his nostrils. He recognized the danger. The professor had thrown a bottle of fluoride into the room. The bottle broke and fluoride fumes filled the air. Listen, Eli, you know fluoride fumes make a dangerous poison gas. Get the idea of the hole the Blue Beetle found himself in? The Blue Beetle shook his head to clear his sagging brains. The fumes were killing him. His eyes burned painfully. He looked at the door. He measured the distance. He rushed at it and threw his body against it. Bang! The door flew open. The professor, waiting for the Blue Beetle to die, was startled. He ran away. The Blue Beetle followed him, fresh air clearing his lungs. The professor was no mean sprinter. He reached the stairs first and rushed down. The Blue Beetle took a chance. He jumped over a railing and landed on the professor's back. They tumbled down one flight, their bodies intertwined. The Blue Beetle was up first. He dug his fist into the professor's belly and followed with a right uppercut that knocked the professor cold. He picked up the professor's body and carried it to the laboratory. He bound the professor and pocketed the bottle of radioactive salt. He carried him to a sedan and drove to the home of Dr. Martin, one of the doctors in charge of the orphanage radium poisoning case. He left the professor and bottle with the doctor after explaining the matter. Yes, the professor's booked at Powell Street Magistrates Court. Better send a photographer, Eli.
Charlie Storm hung up the receiver with a shrug. He lit his old pipe and sauntered out of the telephone booth.
Now I'll see Dan Garrett and Mike Manigan.
He said to himself.
Mike's trying to catch the Blue Beetle too. I wonder about Dan Garrett. He's a smart kid, but he doesn't seem to be interested in the Blue Beetle.
He puffed his pipe, not knowing that Dan Garrett was the Blue Beetle. The end.
This program was adapted from a public domain prose story that appeared in Blue Beetle issue number 2 from 1940, which was written by Charles Nicholas. It was created using Clipchamp's AI text-to-speech function. The creator of this program would like to stress that he is not monetizing it. This is a hobby for him. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.